With one game to go for the Carolina Panthers, we have officially moved into the off-season mode discussion. And when we get into off-season mode discussion, what we like to do is start talking about free agent acquisitions, draft picks, and now Panthers fans are very hyper-focused on the wide receiver position. And I think they should be. We've looked at some of the failures, the Jonathan Mingos, the Terrace Marshall Jr.'s, the players that just haven't hit along the way. We trade away DJ Moore, one of the few picks that we're able to hit on at the wide receiver position. And then we look back at this past year's draft with Xavier Legette. And some folks are probably still out on him, trying to figure out, is he going to come around? I personally believe he's going to find his stride. But I'll also acknowledge that I think the Panthers should strongly consider figuring out who is going to be their true number one wide receiver. And before we get too far into this, I think we should acknowledge the primary purpose of this video is a discussion around Tee Higgins. And one, Tee Higgins is a fantastic wide receiver. He's on a great team in the Cincinnati Bengals. Maybe I should take a step back and say pretty good team, as Cincinnati is trying to back their way into the playoffs after a terrible start. But I would say, relatively speaking, year over year, a pretty good team in the Cincinnati Bengals with a good to great to fantastic quarterback in Joe Burrow when healthy. But you look at Tee Higgins on the roster, where he is today, he really is closer to a number two wide receiver in the mix. And so when a lot of fans start talking about Tee Higgins to the Carolina Panthers, I will say, number one, I'm all for it. I would love to have Tee Higgins here with a caveat and a big but. And that but is for the right price. I don't think the Panthers should overpay Tee Higgins a big contract. And when I say big contract, I'm talking 25 to 30 million, maybe even 25 to 28 million. Because to me, that amount of money is something that you spend on top-notch talent. And I'm saying surefire number one receiver, and I think there's only a handful of those in the league. And I think you likely have to trade for one of those guys. I don't think you're going to pick one of those up right now via free agency. And so if the price is right for Tee Higgins, I'm all for it. I think Tee Higgins can develop. He can potentially be a number one wide receiver, but I think of it as a situation where you look at some teams that have overpaid before. Christian Kirk, he's kind of panned out. Calvin Ridley, kind of panned out. But overall, I don't want the Panthers to be another team that gets desperate at the wide receiver position and then goes all in on someone and in a few years regrets it. It's one of the few positions that if you mess up early, there's not a lot of chance to back out of it. What I would love to see, and the Panthers have a lot of needs, most of them on the defensive side of the ball, if there is a receiver that's available right there in their lap, within the top 6, top 7, or if they can trade back and maybe get 2 picks in the first round, I'm all for them looking at another wide receiver in the draft. And the reason being, if you go out today, and this is as I record this, look at the top 20 wide receivers in receiving yards, and it should say pass catchers because you have tight ends in that mix. 7 of those have been drafted in the last 2 years. So you have a group of rookies and second-year players. 7 of the top 20 receivers in yardage and tight ends have been drafted in the last 2 years. If you throw in the last 3 years, 50% of that list, 10 players drafted in the last 3 years in the top 10, 10 out of the top 20. It is insane. So for me, I look at it more as no need to rush and force yourself in, but you've got to figure out how to draft better. That's my opinion, because it can clearly be done, and we've seen it be done not just at a first rounder or a second rounder, guys drafted way late and still able to produce. And so the Panthers, who have not drafted great, need to figure out how to do that. So all this to say, sure, I'd love to get Tee Higgins. It's got to be at the right price. I know you have Brant Tillis, Dan Morgan. I think the other thing you have to consider is Tee Higgins really going to want to come here. I know there's close ties because of Clemson, but do we really think he wants to play in Carolina, considering all the options that he's going to have available? I guess that's TBD, and we will find out. Anyways, this is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.